This morning, Yakubu Gowon has written a book. Will the millions of kids that died from kwashiorkor during the Civil War be able to read the book? Will the people that were massacred in the Asaba massacre be able to read the book? Will the people who lost homes, limbs, future, possibility be able to read the book? Yes, the book is titled Duty and Allegiance to the Country. In allegiance to Nigeria, was a civil war the best way to have settled the impasse and the rivalry between two people? Should that war have ever happened in the first place? Today, as we try to say our own part of history, and Yakubu Gowon, we thank him for giving us his own part of history today. Although I've not read the book, but I've read some excerpts of it. As he tries to talk about, the internal workings of what happened. If this book, millions that died in that war, cannot read this book, then at least how can we ensure that we don't go to wars like that again? That's a food for thought this morning.
Now, those who have commented on General Gowon's book say, yes, it's anecdotal, but when you put it together, you get, a full sense of history and of his duty, his service during the 9 years that he was head of state of Nigeria. He was, for the benefit of many young men, a very young man in his 30s, 29, 37, thereabouts, when he led this country. And it was his commission to save this country from disintegration. And he stood up to be counted. So the Civil War, 1966, to 71, to 70, 71, was a major turning point for Nigeria. In fact, many people trace many of the problems we have had in this country to that Civil War. But General Gowon and his army, they were able to hold this country together. The other side, of course, was that after the Civil War, he preached no victor, no vanquished. And he introduced a policy of reconciliation, reconstruction, and rehabilitation. But there is a lot of controversy around that, and many people have written their own versions of how the Civil War started. But I always say, repeatedly, that I don't think that the Civil War has ended. The Civil War has not ended because the reconciliation part of it is still an evolving project, and that's why you find people from the southeastern part of the country still talking about Biafra, still talking about the actualization of Biafra, because the most affected people in the southeast, they have not forgotten. History is not about forgetting, it's about remembering. But of course, have we achieved reconciliation? We've done a lot in terms of reconstruction. Then, of course, the Southeasterners, they are also a bit disturbed about the idea of rehabilitation. That after the Civil War, their people were not properly rehabilitated. The £1 resolution, or was it £2, which generated a lot of concerns, properties lost, lives lost. I think that this country will still need a lot of healing. That's talking about, the Civil War and what Nigeria passed through during that time. But to the extent that General Yakubu Gowon held this country together with his team, and that he has remained committed, faithful to the Nigerian project, it sets a good example, an eternal example that cannot be forgotten in this country. However, it is good that General Gowon has told his own part of the story. And he has a story to tell. And it is a story that should be of interest to not just students of history and political science or military studies, but the general public.